How the global financial system is bleeding Ghana dry. The untold truth. The global financial system undermines Africa and Ghana specifically through a combination of structural imbalances, historical exploitation, and modern-day economic mechanisms that reinforce dependency, debt, and underdevelopment. Here's a breakdown of how and why, with emphasis on Ghana. Colonial legacy baked into financial institutions. Ghana, like many African nations, inherited a colonial economic structure designed to extract raw materials for European benefit. After independence in 1957, Ghana's financial and trade systems remained tied to former colonial powers through export-led economies focused on cocoa, gold, and bauxite. Currency pegging and monetary policy that limited sovereign financial experimentation. Reliance on foreign banking institutions for loans, credit, and infrastructure financing. This created an economic model vulnerable to external shocks and price volatility. Debt trap diplomacy and predatory lending. Ghana is currently in a severe debt crisis, spending more than 70% of its revenue on interest payments alone in some years. The causes include high-interest Eurobonds sold on international markets, often with little room for default. Loans from the IMF and World Bank that come with neoliberal austerity conditions, slashing subsidies, cutting public spending, and privatizing state assets. Credit rating downgrades from Western agencies like Moody's and Fitch, which raise borrowing costs often based on political risk assessments that ignore African contexts. This traps Ghana in cyclical borrowing, reducing investment in health, education, and industry. IMF and World Bank Structural Adjustment Programs, SAPs. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ghana became a poster child for SAPs. The results were devastating. Public sector layoffs and weakened state capacity. Privatization of essential services, making water, electricity, and healthcare more expensive and less accessible. Currency devaluation to boost exports, which increased the cost of imports and hurt local businesses. Although GDP figures improved, poverty deepened, and Ghana became more dependent on foreign aid and investment. Resource extraction without local benefit. Ghana is rich in gold, oil, and cocoa, yet sees little return. Multinational corporations, MNCs, dominate the extractive sector, repatriating profits abroad. Ghana receives only a small fraction of royalties from its natural resources due to lopsided contracts and tax avoidance. Illicit financial flows, IFFs, drain billions through transfer pricing, offshore accounts, and under-invoicing. Example, Ghana is the second largest gold producer in Africa, yet many communities near mines remain impoverished and polluted. Currency instability and capital flight. Ghana's cedi is one of the most volatile currencies in Africa. Causes include dependence on imports, creating constant demand for foreign currency. Speculation by hedge funds and foreign investors who pull out quickly during crises. Brain drain and elite capital flight, as wealthy Ghanaians and companies store assets in Europe and offshore accounts. This undermines national savings, investment, and development planning. Trade imbalances and the CFA/Francophone precedent. While Ghana is not in the CFA franc zone, its neighbors are. France still controls monetary policy for 14 West and Central African countries through currency reserves held at the French Treasury. Limits on money supply and loans, which stifles African growth. Ghana trades with these countries yet faces unfair monetary competition due to external control over their economies. Aid dependency and phantom capital. A large share of Ghana's external aid is tied aid, must be used to buy goods/services from donor countries. Short-term loans, that fund consumption instead of long-term industrial growth. Inflated by administrative costs, meaning only a fraction reaches the intended recipients. In 2023, Ghana applied for a $3 billion IMF bailout, but much of that money will go toward paying previous debt, not future development. Green energy push without economic equity. Western institutions now push African countries toward green transitions, often without compensation for historical emissions, without funding to build green infrastructure locally, while pressuring Ghana to abandon fossil fuels it could use for development, e.g., natural gas, reinforcing dependency on imported tech. Ratings and reputation manipulation. Ghana's economic woes are exaggerated by biased global narratives. Western media and financial institutions amplify crises to justify external control or disinvestment. African successes such as Ghana's digital finance boom or democratic stability get less global credit. Sovereign credit ratings are influenced by subjective factors like political stability or investment friendliness as defined by outsiders. Solutions blocked or undermined. Ghana has proposed alternatives such as African Trade Integration, AfCFTA. Pan-African financial institutions like the African Monetary Fund. Taxing illicit capital flows and tightening mining contracts. But these moves are often met with resistance from Western powers and global financial institutions that profit from the current system. Final thought. The global financial system does not just fail Africa, it's structured to extract value from countries like Ghana, even as it promises development. True economic liberation will require regional unity, decolonized financial policy, and homegrown innovation that rejects imposed economic models and reclaims sovereignty over currency, debt, and resources. Ghana is rich in gold, oil, cocoa, and still drowning in debt. How does a country so blessed by nature stay so broke by design? Because the global financial system isn't broken, it's working exactly as it was built. To extract, control, and keep Africa begging. Today, we break down how the system is rigged and how Ghana became one of its biggest victims. Like, comment and subscribe. Share this if you believe Ghana deserves economic justice. Drop your thoughts. Should Africa leave the IMF?